Podcasting has horrible ROI metrics if you look at just conversion, like horrible. If you just want quick conversions on a product, like go buy some Facebook advertising or something else. But if you want to build a body of work that resonates with a specific audience that over time will turn into something meaningful, then I think of no other medium to do it.
You're listening to the Unsure Entrepreneur Podcast with Roger Pierce. Whether you're scribbling business ideas on a napkin or wrestling with the should I, shouldn't I question, get ready to explore the realities, the risks, and the rewards of entrepreneurship as we share the stories, scars, and successes of small business owners.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining the podcast. Glad to have Jamie Irvine here today, and I'll share more about Jamie's impressive background in a few seconds. But meanwhile, welcome, Jamie.
Hi, nice to be here.
Excited to have you, man. We're going to dive into the world of podcasting, and especially podcasting for entrepreneurs, something I know you can speak at length about. So I've got a bunch of questions lined up for you today. So a bit of background for our listeners. More entrepreneurs are turning to podcasts to grow their audiences and attract customers. With over 5 million podcasts globally and over 460 million podcast listeners around the world, podcasting has become, a powerful tool, not just for thought leadership, but for business growth. Now, for niche entrepreneurs, especially, it offers a way to, dominate specific verticals without needing massive followings. Today's guest, Jamie Irvine, built not only one, but two, actually three podcasts, one broad and one laser focused, and the third one we're going to hear about too, leveraging each other to build credibility, attract opportunities, and generate real world business results. In this episode, we're going to dig into how you can do the same. So let me tell you a bit more about Jamie's background so you understand why he's so qualified and the perfect guest to talk about this with us here today. Jamie is a heavy-duty parts industry expert with decades of experience across manufacturing, distribution, and service. He's known for helping fleets reduce costs through strategic purchasing and root cause analysis. Now, Jamie hosted the Heavy Duty Parts Report from 2019 to 2024, producing a mind-blowing 350 episodes and earning over 25.5 million impressions. I've been catching up on some of those episodes, so we'll talk about that along the way too. Now, before that, he hosted a podcast called Build a Better Business, where he interviewed over 150 business leaders, including me, if I'm not mistaken, years ago. And he's got a new podcast out he's going to tell us about, Parts for Trucks podcast. Today, he serves as National Sales Director and podcast host for Parts for Trucks, continuing to influence the industry through smart sales strategy and very targeted communication. Jamie, did I miss anything there?
I think you got it. You made me sound pretty good.
You're a bit intimidating to interview because, as you said, the other side of the microphone, and you're an established pro at this. My little podcast is just a year old and I'm still fumbling my way along, so bear with me. But you've been at it for years.
Yeah. Pretty soon it'll be 10 years. It's hard to believe, actually. I remember first discovering podcasts and just instantly recognizing that it was a medium that I could succeed in. I've always been someone who was blessed with the ability to speak publicly, and it really resonated with me almost immediately.
And now you're confident, you're calm, you can get on the microphone. It's like riding a bicycle.
Yeah, after you do several hundred of these, keep in mind the counts that the 150 episodes with Build a Better Business and the 350 episodes with Heavy Duty Parts Report. Those were all just pre-recorded episodes. I've done nearly 100 live episodes. I've moderated, done like group type content. It's been, I would definitely say everything, if you added it all up, I've probably got to be close to 750 different pieces of content that we've been involved in some capacity. So still chasing the 1,000, but I'll get there.
And for people, to put it in context, for people who don't know much about podcasting, the average person makes it to 20 episodes and gives up. So...
Well, let me speak to that. The statistics actually have changed a little bit. It used to be that the average podcaster made it 12 episodes or 6 months, whichever came first. So when I launched my first podcast, I made a goal to do 100 episodes no matter what. I stuck to that and, ended up doing 150. When I started the Heavy Duty Parts Report after that, I set an even larger goal. And obviously we were able to hit that. But I think you have to have a real commitment to this because especially in the early days before I had a team, I was spending hundreds of hours developing that first show on my own, doing everything from pre-production, production, post-production, all of it myself. And so it's definitely has to be a labor of love because you don't make a lot of money when you first start. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So, again, add some context for me. Paint the picture of the kind of tools and resources a solo person needs versus the end of your Heavy Duty Parts podcast where you had a whole team. You don't need a team at the beginning to get going necessarily, do you?
No, I mean, I had a crappy webcam, a bad microphone. The images of those first episodes and video recordings are horrible. I was using a very simple free software, for editing. Now, all this stuff doesn't even exist anymore because it's all changed in the last almost decade. Yeah, I mean, I was as bare bones, down and dirty as you can get. And it was just determination and drive and willpower, right? Just applying brute force to get it done every week or whatever the interval was. Sometimes you just have to start. And how else are you going to learn? I took inspiration from people like John Lee Dumas, who did the exact same thing. When he started, he always said to his listeners, go listen to my early stuff. It was pretty bad. Well, I could say the same.
You brought him up. He's one of our shared heroes, John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneurs on Fire. What is it, EOF.com or something? But he is prolific and he's pumping out what, like a podcast a day or more?
He did a daily show for a long time. I haven't really followed him in the last little while, but I mean, it was daily for a while. I think he took a break after he had over 2,000 episodes. I was privileged to be one of his guests at one point. So much of my life has changed since that episode. So, you can go listen to it if you want, but none of what I was talking about back then applies to today. It was really great to see somebody who was able to just take an idea and really make it work. I would say for me, though, I tried, in some ways, I tried to copy his format with my first podcast, and I was very broad in my subject. And what ended up happening was that really became the reason why that first show didn't succeed, and that in the sense that it never really broke into a position where I could monetize it sufficiently enough where it would fund itself and it would grow. The subject was too broad. The days of coming out with a broad-based show about one subject like entrepreneurship had long since passed, but I didn't recognize that as a new podcaster.
I'm going to circle back to that in a second and talk to you about build a better business. But Johnny Lee Dumas, go to the website, Entrepreneurs on Fire. And what's cool about it, he's actually got his monthly earnings on there. He's very transparent about it. And he encourages you to go back to the very beginning when he first had his podcast, 2013 or 14. And it shows how he made no money, but now he's doing pretty well.
Yeah, and actually, if you look at his overall revenue, that's been in decline now for several years, which speaks to the tough. I mean, he's still doing just fine, but it actually speaks to how difficult this whole game we're in is and how things are changing. I think there was a golden age of podcasting that has come and gone, and it's a very competitive landscape. That being said, I still believe that it is one of the best ways to develop your clients and customers and a relationship with them. And we can talk more about that in a bit.
Okay, that sounds good. So let's go back to the beginning. Build a Better Business podcast. And this is the one where you're interviewing business leaders and authors and experts, 150 interviews.
Yeah.
What was the impetus there to get that going? And what did you learn from those early interviews? And then eventually you transitioned out of that broader based theme.
Yeah. So I think we have to go back a little bit. I built a business from 2009 to 2016. I sold that business in 2016. So startup to mergers and acquisitions is where I got my master's in business, if you will. I had these people phoning me all the time asking me, like, how did you scale your business, run it remotely? We actually moved from the Vancouver area to Alberta at the end there and was running the business completely remotely. And actually, that's why we were able to sell it, because the owner who bought us out basically said, I don't know, I've been doing this 25 years. I don't know how you do it. can you show me? And I said, well, why don't you buy it and I'll teach you? That was the beginning of our mergers and acquisitions conversation. Remember, when I moved to Alberta and I sold my business, I was looking for other businesses to buy and continue my entrepreneurial journey. And I didn't find any. And so I had an opportunity to go back into the industry that I started my career in, which was the heavy duty parts industry. And so I was back being an employee. So I was fine with that. It was a good sales position, and I was enjoying myself, and I was really enjoying being back in the heavy duty parts industry. And but after a couple of years, the entrepreneurial itch was there, and so I started looking around at different opportunities. And I had stumbled across podcasting, and I had these business owners asking me these questions. And so it wasn't a big jump to think, well, maybe I could side hustle a little business coaching business or consulting business, and maybe that'll turn into something. That was kind of where that came from. So I thought, well, why don't I start interviewing business leaders? At the minimum, I'm going to get an increased education or an improved education on what it takes to be successful in entrepreneurship. I can share that with my potential clients. I'll get better. They'll get better. Might as well give it a try. And so that's kind of how that all came together. The entire time I ran it, I was side hustling. So I had a full-time job, and I was coaching, and I was, doing my podcast. It was a lot. It was a 7-day a week deal there for a couple of years.
What can someone starting off, a one-person show, what kind of time commitment are we looking at for a basic podcast?
I mean, it depends on how quickly you can edit, how OCD you are about jump cuts and B-roll and audio quality. Some people just rip it and send it out. They use AI and boom, it's done, right? And I was never that person. I've got a little bit of I overanalyze things, and I really pride myself on creating good quality audio and decent video. So I've always spent a little more time. I think you can do one of my favorite podcasters is Tim Wolberg out of British Columbia, and he's the podcast coach. Fantastic guy. And he does like a 5-minute episode. I think that's awesome. Like if you have really good, concise learnings that you can share with your clients or your potential customers and your audience, you can do a 5-minute podcast, and you can crank those puppies out once a week. And it's not a huge time commitment. You might be able to get the whole system down to a couple hours a week.
Couple hours a week. So it depends on the cadence, how often you're publishing, your penchant for stickler for quality or not, and complexity too. Are you interviewing multiple guests, and all that plays into it, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. A solo 5-minute show like Tim does is a couple hours. The minute you add a guest, you're looking at least a little bit of prep time. And I really recommend you develop a system, because the more you can automate the onboarding of the guest and getting them prepped and having them come into your ecosystem and be all ready for the interview and all of that stuff, the more you can do that, the less time it takes on you, right? So, but yeah, I think at the minute you add one guest, you're probably, even if you're doing a weekly show, you're probably getting up into the 6 to 8 hours a week kind of deal. If you're doing it, like if you're not just ripping it and throwing it out there, if you're really wanting to build a show that you feel has a production value that amount of time commitment would give you the kind of result you're looking for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, you could be up into the 6-8 hours a week kind of area.
But go back to this first show. What were some of the fears or roadblocks, Jamie, you had in your head, or maybe you experienced getting this thing off the ground? How did you overcome them?
Fears and roadblocks. Roadblocks was the steep learning curve around production, like how to produce a show that is, on the one hand, has a production value that you could be proud of, but on the other hand, has content that is actually actionable and usable for your audience. Tim Wolberg always talks about the promise of the show. So I think for me, I struggled in that first show to find my lane, to figure out who I was exactly trying to help and what I was trying to do for them. Those early struggles of learning caused a bit of anxiety, because, hey, you're putting out content, you've made this commitment to do a certain number of episodes no matter what. And you're kind of figuring it out as you go along, which shows a little bit.
Right. Well, that's okay. And a friend of mine is the YouTuber Evan Carmichael, and he says the same thing. He's produced tens of thousands of videos. He makes his living now off YouTube and content, inspiring entrepreneurs. But he says quite openly, your first video will suck. Don't be afraid to put out the first video. It's going to suck and you're going to get better, right? Just like podcasting, it takes time.
You know what's funny about that is, yeah, like my first video on the Build a Better Business sucked. I had learned so much by the time I started my second show. I will go back and I look at my second show's first few episodes and I go, oh my God, they're horrible. So you know what? It doesn't matter how often you've been at that. There's always room for improvement. You're always going to look back at your early work. And there is an argument to be made that if you're not a little embarrassed of your first launch, you probably launched too late.
So let's talk about the return. I mean, you've gotten some consulting work out of this. When did it start to pay off? When did you start to feel it paid off? Did the first podcast do what you wanted to do in terms of money in return, or was it the second?
First podcast broke even on costs, but not reimbursed me for my time. I don't remember the exact numbers now, but it was something like 600 hours of my time I figured I spent developing the show. So I never got paid for that per se. I broke even on the, the equipment. I broke even on any of the investment I made in marketing, things like that. But it was basically, we'll just call it a wash. And I invested and volunteered my time in my education in podcasting, which set me up for a real great return on investment in the second show.
Okay, let's expand on that, because there are more than one ways to make money, as one can learn. I mean, you can Google and learn, how to monetize a podcast. But to me, the best ways to make money, you can comment, are, it can generate business for you. Like if you're a consultant or a coach, you can sell ads as sponsors, right? But maybe you can give us some of the top ways someone can look to make money or returns.
There's pros and cons of both, right? So if I was anything from a tradesperson to someone who offers professional services, I would first build a show for 10 of the potential customers you'd like to attract. And I would just think about those 10 people and I would make content for those 10 people and I would put it out in the world and you'll find 200 of those people. I think that is the best way to do it because you have complete control over the content, especially with podcasting and an RSS feed on your website with your email list. You control distribution, you control the list. You're not really, now YouTube and other platforms are great, but they can change an algorithm tomorrow and wipe you out. So think about that. I think that's the purest, best form because you have nobody dictating to you what the content should be. The volume issue there, right? It's low volume, but it can be high dollar. The thing about it, if you're a plumber and you put out content and somebody hires you and you get to do a $10,000 job, it's pretty good ROI. If you're a accountant and you've got a specialty for a certain type of business owner or something like that, and you're offering that service, you can make thousands and thousands of dollars consulting and the ROI could be great. But it also depends on your business. If your business, I think the best possible scenario would be a small business owner with a special service for a specific niche audience. They attract a small volume of customers on a regular basis, and they're able to offer those customers repeat services. That's like the holy grail. In the consulting world, it's a lot of one and dones. So you're always hunting. And it was very difficult to build a base of clients because I didn't have those clients necessarily coming back to me time after time after time. They would hire me for a specific acute issue. I would come in, I would help them solve that. If we solved it, they were like, thanks, you solved my problem. I don't need you anymore. You're fired. If they didn't listen to me and they didn't do what I asked them to do, they go, this thing doesn't work, you're fired. So no matter what, as a consultant, you always get fired. But if you're like an accountant, for example, you might be able to have the lifetime value of that customer be 20 plus years. And you attracted them with a podcast, the ROI on that is insane. So I think that's your primary best way of monetizing a podcast, right? Where you have complete control. On the other side of that equation, you have the sponsorship game. If you have a niche audience and you build up this audience, you can offer that to sponsors. The problem is, depending on the amount they pay you, if it's a small sponsorship, they leave you alone. They're like, hey, it's brand awareness for us. We paid them a little amount. Like they don't care. Nobody ever checks. I've signed 6-figure multiple year deals. And it is a completely different game. They watch every metric. They're on you. They are analyzing the content. They are giving you pushback on all kinds of things. And, they really obviously want a really high return on investment. And they're very sensitive to anything that could potentially cause them harm. So they really, whether or not your contract states that you control creative and have creative license, and it's your show and you haven't given them over, you're only licensing the content to them, they still pay the bills. So they are the ones who call the shots. So you kind of have two ends of the spectrum. And then there is a mixed model that I ran in between also that can be very advantageous. We could talk a little bit more about that in a bit.
Wow, so much to unpack there. And so be careful of the devil you don't know, is what I'm hearing in terms of sponsors. I mean, I've always thought, oh, it'd be great to get a sponsor, you know, 15, 20,000 bucks. I've got sponsorship packages out there if anyone's interested. But, you know, there is a responsibility that comes with it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially if you have a team. By the time I had those sponsorship deals, those large sponsorship deals, I had a full team. So now I have people representing me. If they, for some reason, walk away from the system that I've set up and deviate from the system, it's not them that necessarily has to pay for that. It's me. So it became very stressful and it changed the whole experience of running a podcast. And I wouldn't say for the better. That being said, that particular deal and that sponsor, they were amazing people. I love them, and they did so much for me. So on the one hand, it wasn't like it was a completely horrible experience. It's just that it changed the nature of running the show. It changed the expectation. It increased the pressure, and it just didn't make it as fun as it had been up until then.
That's very interesting to hear. As a content producer, and I sell content, as you know, to banks and brands, white label it, small business content. Yeah, I mean, they're paying for it. They can get it the way they want. We'll edit it to them. But if my name's on it, I get a little sensitive. If I'm publishing something and my name's on it, or it's my podcast, I don't know how well I would handle editorial input. You get a lot of that with a sponsor, I would imagine.
You do. Yeah. And rightfully so. They're paying for it. So they're financing, when you get to that level, they're financing your show. And normally it's exclusive deals, right? So, they're not going to pay that much and then share the spotlight with other people.
So you went into this heavy duty parts report, very niche. That took a lot of guts. I mean, you've talked a little bit about the benefits there. What gave you confidence to go so narrow?
So let's think about this, right? The Build a Better Business, it wasn't working. It was too broad. It wasn't attracting a large enough audience that I could monetize in any way, in a real profitable way. And there was no scale there. So I would never be able to stop it being a side hustle. It was never going to really get out of that kind of cycle. So I took a step back and I said, look, I'm working in the heavy duty parts industry again. I wonder if there's any content being made about heavy duty parts. And I typed in heavy duty parts into my search for my podcast player, and it came back with 0 results. And it was one of these palm to forehead moments. I've been anguishing and struggling and trying to build this show, this wide kind of generic show. Then all of a sudden, I look at this podcast player search result and there's 0 results. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've missed it. I've got this extensive background in heavy duty parts. I can be the guy that brings heavy duty parts to the podcasting space for the first time. And in addition to that, in my job as a salesperson, I was working with factory reps and vendors and bringing them out into the field. And we were doing field work together with customers. We were having these amazing technical conversations that were so valuable. And I thought to myself, why couldn't I just make this available to the entire industry? Why are we having just a conversation? We're not capturing this, right? So that was the genesis of the idea. And I actually ran both shows concurrently for a couple months and just tested the heavy duty parts report. And it just it outperformed. After almost 2 years of doing the Build a Better Business, the heavy duty parts report outperformed it in 3 months. And so the answer was just obvious: to shut down Build a Better Business and to transition to a full and put all my resources into the heavy duty parts report. Within another 3 months, it had scaled up to a point where I quit my job and I was doing it full time. So it took basically 6 months to go from launch to full time doing it. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the power of the niche right there.
The riches are in the niches, if you use the American pronunciation of that word.
We could do a whole other show on just, the importance of niche focus for entrepreneurs. That's what I say to, you can't be Walmart. You can't be all things to all people. Pick a lane, go deep, go narrow.
don't worry about the like we all have the curse of knowledge. Like I was like, oh, I have the heavy duty parts knowledge, but so what? So does like 100,000 other people. Yeah, but there was out of the 100,000 other people, there was one person called Jamie Irvine who was willing to combine it with podcasting. The niche is about finding your area where you have a lot of knowledge and then combining it with something else to make it unique.
So I got to ask you, how do you keep a niche podcast fresh and engaging for 350 episodes?
That was a question I had at the beginning, but I realized very quickly that you can go an inch wide and a mile. You can go an inch. How's that? An inch wide and a mile deep. So if you want to get really specific. And so what I did is one of my first episodes was about foundation brakes for air brake systems. And I called in a favor from a manufacturer I had a great relationship with. We talked about brakes like off and on every few months because there's a million things to talk about, right? Safety, performance, cost per mile, how to lower it. What are the considerations based on different vocations? You could have an episode about brakes, about dump trucks, about trucks and trailers, air disc brake versus, the old foundation brake systems. Like you can just go and go and go and go and go. And so what I learned is that people don't get tired of that content. Not to mention, they don't necessarily hear all the content you've done in the past, right? Every single year, there is a brake safety week in August. And there are publicly available statistics that come out from the motor vehicle branches that you can review. And so we talked about brakes all the time. We talked about after treatment because it relates to the emissions and EPA and the environment. There's certain subjects that we could just talk about forever and it would never be boring. Not to mention, if you bring in a guest, you can have 6 or 7 guests talk about the same subject. They're all going to talk about something different. They're all going to bring some nugget of wisdom and gold that the other one didn't. And you can build a body of work that actually becomes very valuable. And here's the secret, podcasters. The guests are not the star of the show. The host is the star of the show. The host is the person the audience develops a relationship with over time, not the guest. So bring on guests, talk about the same subjects, talk about it from different perspectives, get perspectives that collide with each other. Oh, that's always fun.
Great tip. It's true. People are listening. Podcasting is engaging. It's long form content. People put it on the car or at the gym, certainly on mobile, it seems. And yeah, you get inside their head, you develop that relationship, don't you?
Yeah, they hear your voice, they see your mannerisms, you tell your stories, they get to know you, they get to trust you. Here's an interesting thing about that. What's the most common interaction I had with a guest with an audience member who I had never met before at a trade show? It was a hug, not a handshake, a hug. That was a little off-putting at first. These strangers coming up to me, Jamie, and they give me a hug. And then I realized, oh, we're on video together every single week. And in video, we're in that social zone where they feel comfortable with me. They've learned about me. They've heard what I stand for, what I believe in, who I am. They don't know everything about me, but they know enough to know that they like me. And so their natural reaction would be to come up and give me a big hug. It's kind of funny. These big burly guys at heavy duty trade shows, and people are giving us big manly hugs, right? But that was because the trust had been built up over time. So it's just an interesting byproduct of that. And people buy from people they trust. So if you're offering a service, they trust you. They're gonna reach out to you. Plus, it's interesting. If you ask good questions, they see you as the expert, not necessarily just the guest. They recognize the expertise of the guest, but they see you as someone who has wide expertise across a number of different aspects or components of a specific subject matter, right? And so over time, they trust you and they go, hey, this person, if he knows to ask that question, he probably knows the answer before he asks the question, right? So they start to respect your expertise, which is really powerful when you're looking to attract clients.
Absolutely. And do you feel, before we go into asking you a question about Michael Gerber, do you feel forget about the money, the marketing return on investment, getting your brand out there, is it worth it?
Oh, podcasting has horrible ROI metrics if you look at just conversion, like horrible. Like if you just want quick conversions on a product, like go buy some Facebook advertising or something else. But if you want to build a body of work that resonates with a specific audience that over time will turn into something meaningful, then I think of no other medium to do it. So just like with lots of things, it is all about the time frame upon which you look at something, right? So if I'm looking at it in ROI, 30 days of launch of a podcast episode, it's not very good. If I look at 3 years of podcasting about that subject, it could be pretty amazing.
That's very, very important distinction you just made. Thank you for sharing that. Let's touch briefly, and I'm watching our clock too. Michael Gerber, we're both big fans. You had him on your podcast. I've interviewed him before too. One of my heroes, the E-Myth Revisited. How has he and his book shaped the way you think about business and systems?
So go back to 2008. I was talking about starting my first business, and a friend of mine and a bit of a mentor handed me a book, said, you know how you read that book, Psychology of Selling, and it made you a good salesperson? You made a career of it? He goes, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you need to read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I devoured that book, and I've read it. I've lost count how many times I've read it. I've actually read most of his books. There's actually a trilogy. People don't know that. There's The E-Myth, Awakening the Entrepreneur Within, and Beyond the E-Myth. Those 3 books make up a trilogy. So you need to read all 3 of them. It absolutely transformed my entire life because it allowed me to build my first contracting business, systemize it, scale it, and sell it. And I've been systemizing and scaling things ever since. So then to finally get to interview the man, the legend, it was fantastic. I actually spent some time getting to know him afterwards. And, we talked on the phone many times since. He's obviously getting older now, and we haven't talked in a while. But yeah, it was great. I learned a lot from him. I actually made a mistake at one point. I got all excited about bringing together some of my power guests on that original show, and I didn't ask enough permission before I started putting some stuff out there, and got my knuckles wrapped, and had to go and hat in hand and say, I'm so sorry, inexperience. I made a mistake, and I apologize to the 3 or 4 people. They all were very gracious, but Michael was the one who actually took the time to really talk with me and mentor me through that, and help me understand, what happened there, and also pointed to the fact that I should be very proud that I was the type of person who would come and apologize. And so, it wasn't all great. I mean, it is, I've had an interesting journey with that man. And just to say that he's been influential in my life is an understatement.
He certainly is a hero to a lot of us. And the books, for those who haven't read them yet, it's all about entrepreneurial seizure. You're a plumber. He talks about, I think you talked about it in the podcast. You love plumbing, but you really don't know anything about running a plumbing business.
Well, I tell people all the time when they come to me and they say, I'm this, I'm a mechanic, I'm an electrician, I'm a plumber, I'm an accountant, I'm a salesperson, and I'm a parts person. And I want to start what? I want to start an electrical company, a plumbing company, an accounting office, a parts business, a sales agency. And I always ask one question. Do you really love your job? Oh yeah, I love it. I said, then don't start a business, because you won't get to do the job you love anymore, because you have a completely other full-time job called building and running a business that will prevent you from truly being able to do what you love. And it's an interesting conversation when you walk through people. But yeah, systemizing how to do the thing that is done in your job and turning that into a business system is what those books are all about. And just fantastic.
It's a fantastic read, and it's so important. Build up the systems, remove yourself from the equation eventually. Makes it easier to transition to a buyer if that's what you want, or leave it to family. But more importantly, allows you to run a business without being there every day and being stuck in the muckety muck.
The system is the solution. The solution is the system.
I love it. The system is the solution.
That's a Michael Gerber quote. No, that's not a Jamie Irvine quote.
Copyright Michael Gerber. Got it. Okay. Heading into our wrap, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One, podcast related. So let's say, this show is for aspiring entrepreneurs, people just getting into it, thinking about it, unsure about entrepreneurship. What advice would you give them? How can they get into podcasting easily?
Buy a microphone and start recording content with people. Just get a microphone, get a webcam, hit record, bring people on. It's like anything, you will get better at with it with practice, right? It's like that story about the person who jumps in the cab and says, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And the cab driver says, practice. So that's the podcasting thing. Just get into it. Just start. But Don't be random about the type of content that you put out there. That's not going to work. So think very deeply about who your ideal audience is going to be. And that ideal audience should be your ideal customer profile. Think very, very specifically. And every piece of content you put out, make it all about them. Not about you, not about what you do, about them. And I like to run through a little simple formula for an episode. I do this for sales presentations. I do this in everything. So you don't talk about yourself, okay? Big idea. Who is this for, right? Identify the hero of the story, which is your customer. Identify the problem that they face, which is the villain. You are the guide. You are Obi-Wan to Luke Skywalker, who's fighting Darth Vader. Talk about why the problem is hard to solve. Talk about the economic impact of the problem. Talk about the various solutions available to solve the problem and why it's a hard problem to solve. Show them if they care about 1, 2, 3, they will use solution X, and that's your solution. Then provide a case study or some sort of social proof that it works. And then explain the rules of doing business with you and ask them what they think that would do in their life or their business if they applied that solution. Follow that formula. And you can do that in a 5-minute episode or a 3-hour episode. But follow that formula and focus on your ideal customer profile and make sure that you are very consistent in the call to action. People overestimate a call to action, in a time frame of a month, and they underestimate what would happen if they use the same call to action for a year. So just to get really consistent there, but follow that kind of a formula like that. Find something that works for you. You can borrow mine or you can change it and find what works. But those are the critical pieces to get started with a podcast and turn it into a revenue stream for you.
Fantastic advice. And I'm going to put the links to your shows in the show notes so people can learn from your past episodes. Thank you for sharing that. So the last question, if you don't mind, putting on your business hat, Jamie, you've been through it all as an entrepreneur. What's a piece of advice you'd give for someone thinking about getting into this crazy world?
I think you should think really, really deeply about your motivation for starting the business. If you are completely in love with the idea of building a business that is completely systemized, that has employees working in it, that the business can not only operate but can grow and scale without your direct involvement, and you're absolutely in love with that job, you should do nothing but be an entrepreneur. If you are looking for a dream world where you work 2 hours a week and make millions of dollars and you never have to do any work, then entrepreneurship's not for you, because entrepreneurship, especially when you're building a business, is nothing but, hard work. Oftentimes there's this disconnect, and a lot of people look at the success stories, right? Oh, this person started their business in their garage and now they're worth $250 million. I actually know somebody who's like that. But when you hear the story behind the scenes of what they went through and what they had to do, and it's just not what people think. Entrepreneurship is not what people think when they see a successful entrepreneur who won capitalism. That's not the norm. That's not the norm. So if you really, really love the idea of building a business and that's the job you want to have, then entrepreneurship is for you. If you really love your job, I think you should think very carefully about starting a business that does that job. And I think you should be very wary of that because the cost of it can be very high, and not just monetarily, not just investment dollars, but time away from family, time away from things that you love to do. I didn't take a real holiday in 15 years. That was a mistake. And looking back, I go, what was I thinking? So there's a lot to think about there. And almost none of it is actually about the business. It's more about you and what you want and your motivations. I think that's really important. And then if you just look at it strictly from a business perspective, the ideal situation, in my opinion, is a service that people are already looking for, or a product that people are already looking for, that has a moderate to low competitive environment, and that you can build a repeat base of customers that you can serve on an ongoing basis, which extends the lifetime value of the customer. You need to think about those things, because it's very difficult to sustain a business where you're constantly having to hunt for new customers and you're always rolling over your customer base. So there's some things to think about.
Great advice. And another great book, Toronto-based author John Warlow, The Automatic Customer, talks about what you're saying there. Subscription-based businesses, repeat customers, those are the nirvana. Those are the best businesses to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe one last thing, if you really want to start a business, maybe don't necessarily start a business in the thing that you're, one of my successful businesses was gutter cleaning, power washing, window cleaning, exterior building maintenance. I knew nothing about that business. And because I knew nothing about that business, I didn't want to do the work. So I just focused on building the business that did that work. And I hired people who knew how to do that work. And, it worked out pretty good.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, listen, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. But I want to thank you very much, Jamie, for sharing your podcast journey and your entrepreneurial journey with experience with us. It means a lot to our listeners. And before you go, if someone wants to get in touch, what's the best way to connect?
I think the best way is just to reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you want to put my LinkedIn profile there in the show notes, that would be best. If you want to check out the body of work that I did with the Heavy Duty Parts Report, that podcast is still live with all 350 episodes on heavydutypartsreport.com. You can check that out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always looking for new people to connect with.
Sounds good. Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again, Jamie. And to our listeners, thank you for being here. And be sure to return next time for more insights from the Unsure Entrepreneur.
That's it for this episode of the Unsure Entrepreneur podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss other candid conversations with small business owners. And be sure to check us out at unsureentrepreneur.com.